Hi everyone, I'm Allie with Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you here how to do a spiked bracelet. And this bracelet is based on a 2-needle technique that we're going to be working with 2 needles. And for this one here, you're going to need a strand of spike beads. And these spike beads are the larger of the 2 spike beads. You can use smaller or larger. That's up to you which size you want to use. For this one, I'm using the 7 by 17 millimeter spikes. I'm also going to be using 4 millimeter Swarovski crystals. I have a matte gray bead here in a 6 millimeter gemstone. I'm going to be using a button as my clasp, 11 seed beads, and 0.006 Wildfire beading thread. And again, 2 needles is what we're going to start out with. And you can really change this around and kind of work with it differently, but these are the beads that I'm going to be using. Color-wise, I'm using the blue luster, the baby blue luster in the spikes. For my seed beads, I'm going to use the Montana Blue Gold Luster, and again, I'm using that 6 millimeter matte gray sea glacious look finish, as well as my clear 4 millimeter Swarovski crystals. So to start out with my project, I thread my 2 needles onto a 5-foot piece of beading thread, and I'm going to thread them onto the same piece of thread. Whenever I start with 2 needles, I always find it easiest to start with a clasp. And what I'm going to do is actually go through my button clasp here, but I'm going to add 3 beads. And I'm going to start with my button and then go back from there. I'm going to add 3 beads and let that drop down to the very bottom center of my thread. And then I'm going to add my button on. I'm going to go through, one needle is going to go through one hole, one needle through the other towards the back. And these are our Czech cup buttons that I'm using. But you could use any sort of clasp. And I just added the 3 beads there because it's going to decorate the button a little bit and give a little bit of that blue color to it. You could use a crystal, you could use some other beads as well, but I just put those 3 beads on there because I like the look of it. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 3 seed beads and put 3 on each needle. I'm going to let those 3 seed beads then drop back next to my button clasp. After I do that, I'm going to take both needles. Using both needles, I'm going to put on 2 more seed beads on one needle. And then I'm going to use the other needle to put them through as well. So both needles are going in the same direction. And that's going to pull my button closed a little bit. And it creates a little V. Now I'm going to get into my project. I'm going to separate out my needles, and I'm going to get ready to work from either side. To start out, I'm going to create a V by using 4 seed beads on each needle. And then I'm going to cross through one of my first 6 millimeter beads. Normally these will be on the sides. For this first one, I'm going to have it be in the middle as well because I'm not going to start my bracelet right off on a spike. So my needle that is on the right is going to go from right to left. My needle on the left is going to go left to right. I'm going to pull in both directions, and it's going to drop those 4 beads that I added on each side, as well as that 6 millimeter right down to the base. And I'm going to have that little cross section right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a seed bead on each needle. This is going to work to kind of cover the sides a little bit and cover my side thread. And then I'm going to add another 6 millimeter on each needle, followed by an 11L on each needle. So on each needle I have a 11L, a 6 millimeter bead, and an 11L. I'm going to let them drop back down to my last 6 millimeter bead that I added. So they're going to drop right down there. Next I'm going to start adding my spikes. The spikes are always going to be on the cross section. So normally, at first I did this bead here on this cross section because I didn't want to spike right at the very beginning. It might make it a little bit uncomfortable to wear or uncomfortable to put on. So now I'm going to pick up this spike, and the spike is always going to be crossed through. So needle from right to left, needle from left to right, crossing through that spike. and pulling nice and tight, and your spike will sit a little bit to the side there. We're going to force that up by the time that we add the other beads. Also, you want to force it up at this point as well. Next, I'm going to continue the pattern of seed bead, 6 seed bead, and do the same on my left needle, seed bead, 6 seed bead. Let that drop down next to my spike on either side, and then get ready to add another spike crossing through. Needles going right to left and left to right. So it's always going to be that same exact pattern that you're working with. Adding the 6s and the spikes. And they're going to sit right up like that. So I'm going to continue adding my 11, 6, 11 on each side and crossing through the spikes for the whole remaining portion of my wrist. And then I'm going to actually finish with one of my 6mm beads. While you're doing this bracelet, you always want to make sure that the spikes stay up to the top. If one previous is down at the bottom, you're not going to be able to go back and correct that. So you need to make sure that the spikes are all sticking up towards the top as you go. They'll move around a little bit again until we get those crystals in place to hold them, but you want to make sure that they're all at least facing the correct direction, because if they are facing down, like I said, once you get past the next one, you won't be able to go back and change it. So you want to make sure to always take that last one that you're putting on and making sure that the one before it is still sitting to the top. And then do your most recent one and flip that to the top as well. So I'm on to my last spike here, and I'm putting that in place. And then after my last spike, again, because I don't want to start and end with a spike, I'm going to be putting on one of my 6/0s in place of the spike. So I'm going to cross through one of my 6/0 beads. After that, I'm going to get ready to do a loop. And that loop, I just need big enough to fit my button. If you were doing a clasp, you would just attach to the clasp at this point as well. So depending on what you're doing is what kind of clasp you're putting on is the step that you're going to do now. And I just have mine starting and finishing the same. So I started with 4 seed beads on either side, and I'm going to do the same thing now, putting 4 seed beads on my right needle, and then 4 on the left. After I have my 4 on each side, I'm going to join with 2, just like I did on the other side, that my 2 beads are going through the same needle. So I have 2 beads going through in the same direction. And what that's going to do then is pull that nice into a V. So I have that little V section there. I'm going to just put one of my needles into my bead mat now, and I'm going to be using the other one. And what I'm going to do is make a loop that's big enough to fit through my button. So I'm going to pour out a couple more of my seed beads here. And I'm going to make a nice seed bead loop. Adding all of the beads onto, again, one side of my thread. And once I get all of those beads on, I'm going to reinforce it with the other thread. So I'm going to push all these beads on. And once I have enough, again, that it's big enough that it'll go through my button, I'm going to use all my beads sitting here. And once I have it there, I'm going to take my needle on the other side and pick that one up, and I'm going to go back through those beads in the opposite direction through that whole line of seed beads. I'm going back through that whole line again, back to where the original thread is coming out. When I give a nice tight pull then, what's going to happen is I'm going to get 2 strands of thread through that clasp. I'm going to pull nice and tight and get those two going through. That way my clasp has a little bit of a reinforcement that it's not just one piece of thread going through, it's actually two. Those needles then, I'm going to take back down the 2 beads. So you're actually going to have 4 pieces of thread going back down those 2 beads that I'm coming out of. After I come out there, I'm going to give a nice tight pull also to make sure that I don't see any extra thread showing. And that way it gets it nice and tight. To start my pattern then, to add my crystals, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through with my needle that's on the right, and I'm going to go through all 4 of those seed beads that are on the right side, and then I'm going to cross my needle through my first 6mm bead towards the left. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side with my left needle, going through the beads on the left, and then taking that needle from the left to the right of the bead. And there we have it. And now we're in place to add our 11s and our crystals in between our spikes. To add the beads between the crystals, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 beads onto the right needle. I'm going to add 3 beads onto my left needle. I'm going to crisscross through then, just like I did as the base. I'm going to crisscross through a 4mm Swarovski. Give a nice tight pull. And then I'm going to add 3 more beads on either side. So 3 beads on the right, 3 beads on the left. And then what I'm going to be doing is actually picking up the spike that's underneath it. So my needle is going to go from right to left through the base of the spike. And then I'm also going to go from left to right through the base of the spike. And give a nice tight pull, and that puts it right on top. I'm going to continue doing the same exact thing over and over till I get done through the spikes. Again, I'm using my 3 beads on the right, 3 beads on my left, crossing through a crystal, going from left to right, right to left, and then I'm going to mimic those 3 seed beads on either side. Pull those threads out there, then 3 on the right and left, and then after the 3, crisscross through your spike. And that's going to make sure also that those spikes stick up nice and flat, that they're sticking up nice and high. And you're getting that nice spike look to it. And after each one, you're just going to give a little tug to make sure that it's nice and tight. And we're going to continue that the whole way, just adding 3 beads, crossing through a crystal, 3 beads, onto our next spike. So you can see as I continue my kind of cheat, I'll go for a while and I add 3 beads, a crystal 3 beads, and then cross through. It also gives it a nice wavy look that you could even just keep the pattern like that. But then I go back and I add my 3 beads. I pick up my next crystal and cross through it. And then pick up my next 3 beads and cross through my spike as well. So when you're looking here then, I'm going to pick up the spike after my 3. I'm crossing through that base of the spike. When I come out then, I'm on to the next crystal. So I just add 3 more beads. Cross through my crystal. Three more beads. Cross through the base. That's just kind of a little cheat that I do. And you just want to make sure I don't go too far in it because the whole length, because I want to make sure that I'm able to still tighten it because I don't want to see a lot of thread. But it does save me time, that way I don't need to go back and forth with the needles. So I usually do about 5 of those, 5 or 4, just to make sure again that if I need to go back and tighten, I don't get too far that I can't tighten it anymore. So once you're at the end here, basically you're just going to be reinforcing the end. I'm going through that first 6mm bead that I added at the very beginning, again crossing through to finish my pattern here. Then I'm going to keep one needle here to the left, and with the right needle I'm going to retrace everything back through the button and the beads that are on the sides. So I'm going up the side here. I'm going to go up through those 2 seed beads, again that are the joiners, through the 3, and then up through the top of my cup button. I'm going to go through those 3 seed beads then that are right at the top of the cup button. And it might get a little bit tricky because of the shape of it. I've gotten 2, and then here's my 3rd one. After I'm through those 3 beads, I'm going to go down my cup button. And also at the same time, if you can, grab onto those seed beads. It's easier if you do it all at once. I'm going to go down then the opposite side that I came up. So I'm going down through those 2 seed beads again, and I'm going to go through the 4 on the side of the 6. This is a project that's really easy to finish off as well. All I'm going to do is take my needles off the end, go here to the side, and do a nice tight knot. I'm going to go right over left and then left over right. And still, anytime I'm doing knots, I'm always going to pick up my glue and do a little dab of glue and then either burn off or cut off the ends. So I have 2 knots that I've done. I'm going to do 1/3 one. Do a dab of glue then. And I'm just using our super new glue. It's a fast drying jewelry super glue. And I'm going to glue right to that knot and let that dry. And you always want to make sure that any glue that you have, that it's off your bead mat because you don't want it to dry on your bead mat. If you want to, you can even take your needle back through the 6 and try to pull that wet knot a little bit into that 6mm bead. You're going to trim your edges down, again, either with cutters or with a burner, and you'll have your project finished. So as I said before, we have big spikes and we have the small ones as well, that if you don't want it to sit up quite as high on your wrist, you can also use the smaller ones. You could also adapt this for a necklace if you wanted to, or change out the bead in the middle completely. But you're just going to stick that on and it's going to go right on your wrist, and you'll get that nice look of that spikes, but still have some of that elegance with the crystals. And it doesn't really matter which color you do it in, they all look great. And if you get a chance, check out the rest of our YouTube videos. Also visit us online at thebeadco.com. Check out our locations page, and we'd love to see you in one of our physical locations to pick up some spike beads, crystals, or whatever you need. Also take a class with us. If you can't get to one of our stores, you can shop online at thebeadco.com, and we'd be happy to help you there and gather the materials that you need for any of your projects. Have a great rest of your day beading, and hopefully you check out some of our other YouTube videos. Thanks a lot for watching.